Now, to some of you out there, this may be very basic, but it's something I had to do to figure out exactly what kind of signals I was getting from my crankshaft sensor to see if I could eventually emulate those signals. And what I've got here is my oscilloscope, and I'll be actually working on the top line right here, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then I'll collect data over here on the computer, and I'll hook that up in a little while. And what I'm going to do first is show you the signal I get, the square wave signal I get from the sensor when I just have the car at idle. And what I've got over here is I've actually gone down to the crankshaft sensor, which you can't see here. I had to disassemble all this to get down into the bowels of the engine. And there are 3 wires coming off of them. One is a ground, which I've got hooked to a green wire now, and then I've got a 5-volt signal wire coming out here, and then I've got an 11.44 volt wire that I think is what you would consider the supply wire to the Hall effect sensor down there. But since I'm only pulling the data off of it, I really don't need that right now. And I've checked all these out. There's actually no signal coming from the 11 volt wire. The only signal I get is a square wave coming off the 5 volt sensor wire. But I'll crank the motor now. See, we're dealing with 500 microseconds, and then 2 volt scale. And what you're looking at there now is the square wave. My average voltage is nearly 4.93, and my waveform has a frequency of 750 hertz roughly, bouncing around a little bit, and I'm getting 2.5 volts at the top and negative 2.3137 on the bottom. So that's the height of my waveform. Go there and push the accelerator, and I'm going to see what happens to the waveform. Let me try that one more time. Alright, I've got it running at about a little less than 2,000 RPM, and it says I'm running at about 17 or 1.7 kilohertz. It's probably about 1,700 RPM. It says about 2.9 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz. Alright. And back down to idle. And it's running about 700 hertz there. Alright, the next thing I've got here is called my gem stem, and this is a Waveform Simulator. Let me just see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. That I purchased online. It's called the gem stem, and it will do, this is coarse and fine tachometer. This is a spare. This is your O2 sensor output, throttle position output. That's a manifold. I think that's an mass airflow sensor, and this is a temperature gauge, I believe. I'm not sure, but I'll have to look at that. I haven't played with that one. The one I've been really interested in first was the tachometer, and we'll show you how that works. I've got it hooked up so that I'm putting out a tach signal through this wire here. This is a ground. And let me back up a little bit. Come this way a little bit, and I'm going to hook the wire up, and you'll be able to see the square wave signal coming out of this thing. There you go. And it's putting out a signal that's right at 826 hertz. Let's slow it down a little bit. 806 or 7. It's about 750. That's about what the BMW idle's at. And you see my total voltage is 7.31 volts on this. It's a little bit higher than what the BMW has. And my total voltage here on the upswing is 3.7 and downswing is negative 3.5. So this thing will put out an appropriate waveform. The voltage may be a little bit higher than what BMW is used to seeing, but the next thing I'm going to try is to see if I can turn the tachometer on in the BMW just by using the gem stem. I'll focus down on this to see if we can pick up those numbers a little better. Yeah, that's pretty good. And let's watch that frequency go up. Go down. Alright, I've got the ignition on, got everything almost hooked up, and I'm going to turn on the gem stem now. And I'm putting out a waveform, and let's see what's happening to the tach in here. That tach is not doing anything. So it does not believe the gem stem. So now we got a waveforms coming out, right frequency. It's just not giving it the right information that it wants. So we're going to turn it off. Well, to recap, what I found out is that I can get a signal from my crankshaft sensor. I do know what the signal looks like. I know the signal increases in frequency in direct relationship with RPM, and the frequency is actually the exact RPM. I think it has to do with the 60 tooth reluctant wheel, or 60 minus 2 tooth, which is close enough. And I also know that the gem stem produces a frequency that is, or can produce a frequency very similar to the crankshaft sensor output. However, the voltage is a little different. And I also know that the BMW tachometer will not pick up this voltage, so, or the frequency. So what I've got to do is somehow simulate this signal at a different voltage, and I may have to get somebody to help me make something like that. I'm also going to figure out where the the camshaft sensor data is, both from the input and the output, and see if that's necessary for the ECU to simulate a tachometer signal. And I'll also look at the O2 sensors. I know that this engine will run, and the tachometer runs without the mass airflow sensor, because I've started up several times, forgot to connect it back together, and it runs just fine. It skips a little bit when you first start it, but then after it figures out it's not getting that signal, the motor runs just fine. And I'm getting a tachometer signal the whole time, so I'm not even going to worry about mass airflow sensor at this point. But the other ones I will figure out one at a time, and we'll kind of go from there. This is James from North Mississippi.